The grand ballroom of the royal palace shimmered with golden light from hundreds of crystal chandeliers. Ladies in silk gowns whispered behind jeweled fans, while gentlemen in military uniforms discussed politics near marble pillars. The annual spring festival celebration was in full swing, with over 300 of the kingdom's most important people gathered to honor the harvest season. Princess Elena stood near the enormous windows, watching couples dance across the polished floor. She wore a deep blue gown that matched her eyes, her dark hair pinned up with small diamonds that caught the light. At 22, she had attended dozens of these events, but tonight felt different somehow. There was tension in the air that she couldn't quite understand. The orchestra played a waltz as servants moved between guests carrying silver trays of wine and delicate pastries. Everyone seemed happy and relaxed, celebrating another successful year in the kingdom. The crops had been good, trade was strong, and there had been no wars or major conflicts. Life was peaceful and prosperous. Suddenly, the massive oak doors at the far end of the ballroom burst open with a loud crash. The music stopped immediately. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every head turned toward the entrance as heavy boots echoed across the marble floor. Captain Marcus of the Royal Guard strode into the room, his usually perfect uniform dirty and torn. His face was pale and covered with sweat, despite the cool evening air. But what shocked everyone most was what he carried in his arms. A young girl, perhaps 14 years old, lay unconscious against his chest. Her simple peasant dress was muddy and ripped in several places. Dark bruises covered her arms and face, and there was dried blood on her forehead. Her long brown hair hung in tangled strands, and her breathing was shallow and uneven. The ballroom remained completely silent. 300 people stood frozen, staring at this unexpected and disturbing scene. Princess Elena felt her heart racing as she looked at the injured child. Who was she? How had she been hurt? And why had Captain Marcus brought her here, to the most important social event of the year? The captain's eyes searched the crowd until they found the king, who stood near his golden throne at the front of the room. King Alexander's face had gone white with shock, but he quickly stepped forward. His crown caught the chandelier light as he moved, and his royal robes rustled softly in the silence. "Marcus," the king said in a voice that carried across the entire ballroom. "What has happened? Who is this child?" Captain Marcus took a deep breath, still holding the girl carefully in his strong arms. His voice was hoarse and tired when he finally spoke. "Your Majesty, we found her in the forest, 3 miles from the village of Millbrook. She was barely alive when we discovered her, and she keeps saying the same thing over and over again." The king stepped closer, his expression growing more concerned. "What does she say?" The captain looked around at all the watching faces, then back at his ruler. "She keeps repeating, 'The Shadow Man took them all. The Shadow Man took them all. And Your Majesty, Millbrook is completely empty. Every single person in that village has vanished without a trace." A collective gasp echoed through the ballroom. Several ladies grabbed their fans and began fanning themselves rapidly. Men whispered urgent questions to each other. Princess Elena felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm room. An entire village gone? How was that possible? The king's face grew grim as he processed this information. He had ruled this kingdom for 30 years and had never heard of anything like this happening before. Villages didn't just empty overnight. People didn't simply disappear into thin air. And what did this mysterious shadow man have to do with it all? "Take her to the royal physician immediately," the king commanded. "Have Dr. Williams examine her injuries and try to wake her safely. Post guards outside the medical wing. No one enters or leaves without my permission." As Captain Marcus turned to carry the girl away, she stirred slightly in his arms. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, unfocused and filled with terror. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said the words that would haunt everyone present. "For weeks to come, he's coming for the castle next. The Shadow Man, he's coming for all of you." Then her eyes closed again and she fell back into unconsciousness. Captain Marcus hurried from the ballroom, his boots echoing in the renewed silence. The king stood motionless, staring at the doors where they had disappeared. To the 300, guests remained frozen, uncertain whether to leave or stay, whether to panic or remain calm. Princess Elena realized that their peaceful, prosperous kingdom was about to face something terrible and unknown. The spring festival celebration was over, even though the night had barely begun. Whatever had happened in Millbrook was just the beginning of a mystery that would change everything they thought they knew about their safe, comfortable world. Dr. Williams worked through the night in his stone chambers beneath the castle. The royal physician was a thin man with gray hair and gentle hands, known throughout the kingdom for his skill in healing. He had treated everything from simple fevers to battle wounds, but the unconscious girl presented him with injuries unlike anything he had seen before. Her bruises were strange, almost perfectly circular, as if something had wrapped around her arms and legs with incredible force. The cut on her forehead wasn't from a blade or a fall, but seemed to have been made by something sharp yet curved. Most disturbing of all, her skin was unusually cold to the touch, despite the warm blankets he had wrapped around her. Princess Elena sat in a chair beside the bed, refusing to leave despite her father's suggestions that she return to her chambers. She watched the girl's pale face, noting how young and innocent she looked even with the terrible bruises. The princess had dismissed her lady-in-waiting hours ago, preferring to keep vigil alone. "Any change, doctor?" King Alexander asked as he entered the medical room for the fourth time that evening. His crown had been replaced with a simple circlet, and worry lines creased his weathered face. Dr. Williams shook his head slowly. "She's stable, Your Majesty, but something is keeping her in this deep sleep. Her body should be healing, but it's as if something is holding her back. I've tried every remedy I know." The king paced to the window, looking out at the dark forest, beyond the castle walls. Reports had been coming in all evening from the village of Millbrook. The royal guard had searched every house, every barn, every cellar. Not a single person remained. Meals sat half-eaten on tables. Fires still burned in hearths. Clothes hung on washing lines as if people had simply vanished in the middle of their daily activities. The strangest part, Captain Marcus had reported earlier, is that there are no signs of struggle. No blood, no broken furniture, no indication that anyone fought or tried to run. It's as if they all just left willingly. But left to go where? And why had this one girl been found alone in the forest, injured and terrified? As midnight approached, Princess Elena found herself nodding off in her chair. The events of the evening had been emotionally exhausting, and the warm room made her drowsy. Dr. Williams had fallen asleep at his desk, his head resting on an open medical book. The girl in the bed began to stir. Her fingers moved slightly, and her breathing changed from shallow to deeper. Princess Elena jerked awake, instantly alert. She leaned forward, watching carefully as the girl's eyelids fluttered. "Doctor," Elena whispered urgently. "She's waking up." Dr. Williams hurried to the bedside just as the girl's eyes opened fully. They were green, like spring leaves, but filled with a fear so deep it made Elena's heart ache. The girl looked around the unfamiliar room, taking in the stone walls, the medical instruments, the concerned faces watching her. "Where am I?" she asked in a voice still weak from her ordeal. "You're safe," Princess Elena said gently, taking the girl's hand. "You're in the royal castle. I'm Princess Elena, and this is Dr. Williams. You were hurt, but you're going to be fine." The girl's eyes widened with recognition and something that might have been relief. "Princess? You're really the princess? I've seen your portrait in the village square." "What's your name?" Elena asked softly. "Sarah. Sarah Miller. My father runs the grain mill in Millbrook." Her voice broke slightly. "At least he used to run it." Dr. Williams brought a cup of water to her lips, and she drank gratefully. Color was slowly returning to her cheeks, though the bruises remained dark and painful looking. "Sarah," Princess Elena said carefully, "can you tell us what happened? In your village? We found it completely empty." The girl's face went white again, and her hand gripped Elena's tightly. "The Shadow Man came 3 days ago. At first people said he was just a traveling merchant, but he never showed any goods to sell. He wore a long, dark cloak that seemed to move even when there was no wind. And his face, we could never quite see his face clearly. She paused, taking shaky breaths as the memories came flooding back. Dr. Williams checked her pulse and nodded encouragingly for her to continue when she felt ready. He would talk to people in the square during the day, just normal conversations about the weather, about their families, about their work. But after talking to him, people started acting strange. They would stop what they were doing and just walk toward the forest. Not running, not looking scared, just walking like they were going somewhere they wanted to be. Princess Elena felt chills running up her arms. And you? Why didn't you go with them? Sarah's green eyes filled with tears. I hid in our cellar when I saw my parents walking toward the woods with that blank look in their eyes. I called to them, begged them to stop, but they couldn't hear me. Or they didn't want to hear me. I stayed hidden for 2 whole days, hoping they would come back. But they didn't, Elena said quietly. No one came back. By the 3rd day, the entire village was empty except for me. I was so hungry and scared that I decided to follow the path everyone had taken into the forest. Maybe I could find them and bring them home. Dr. Williams leaned forward with interest. What did you find in the forest? Sarah's whole body began to tremble, and Princess Elena squeezed her hand reassuringly. I found a clearing I had never seen before, even though I've lived in Millbrook my whole life. There was a circle of black stones, each one taller than a person, and in the center, she stopped speaking and closed her eyes tightly, as if trying to block out the memory. Take your time, Elena said gently. In the center was a pit that seemed to go down forever. I could hear voices coming from deep below, but they didn't sound human anymore. They were calling, pleading, but the words were all wrong. And standing beside the pit was the Shadow Man. When he saw me, he smiled, and I could finally see his face clearly. Sarah opened her eyes and looked directly at Princess Elena. It wasn't a human face. It was something wearing a human face like a mask. And when he reached for me, I ran faster than I've ever run in my life. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this terrifying account. Princess Elena felt her heart pounding as she imagined this brave girl running through dark woods, pursued by something that wore human faces like disguises. He caught me before I could reach the village, Sarah continued. But instead of dragging me back to that pit, he hurt me and left me in the forest. I think he wanted me to be found. He wanted me to tell someone what I saw. King Alexander, who had been listening quietly from the doorway, stepped into the room. Why would he want that? Sarah looked at the king with those frightened green eyes and spoke the words that would send the entire kingdom into panic. Because he said the castle has the most people he's ever seen in one place. He said it would be the perfect harvest. The emergency council meeting began before dawn in the king's private war room. Maps covered every wall, and a large wooden table dominated the center where the kingdom's most trusted advisors gathered. King Alexander sat at the head, his face drawn with exhaustion and worry. Princess Elena had been given permission to attend, much to the surprise of several elderly counselors who believed royal daughters should not be involved in matters of defense. Captain Marcus stood before a detailed map of the kingdom, pointing to various locations with his gloved finger. We've sent riders to every village and town within 50 miles of Millbrook. So far, we've found 3 more settlements completely abandoned. Oak Ridge, Ferndale, and Little Creek. All empty, all showing the same signs. No struggle, no bodies, just gone. Lord Harrison, the king's chief advisor, rubbed his gray beard thoughtfully. That's over 2,000 people who have vanished. How is such a thing possible without anyone noticing until now? Because it's been happening slowly, Princess Elena said, speaking up despite the surprised looks from some counselors. Think about it. If entire villages disappeared overnight, we would have heard about it immediately. But if people left gradually over several weeks, it might take time for anyone to realize something was wrong. Sir Edmund, the kingdom's treasurer, consulted his ledgers nervously. The tax collectors did report that some areas had been unusually quiet during their recent rounds. We assumed people were simply avoiding them, which happens sometimes during difficult harvests. King Alexander drummed his fingers on the table, a habit he had when thinking through complex problems. Sarah mentioned that this creature speaks to people before they leave. What exactly does he say to them? Captain Marcus had spent additional time questioning the girl after she had recovered more of her strength. She says he asks about their families, their hopes, their fears, normal conversation topics. But she noticed that people seemed happier after talking to him, as if he had solved all their problems. They would smile more, worry less, and then within a day or two they would walk into the forest. He's enchanting them somehow, Dr. Williams said from his seat near the window. I've read about such things in the old medical texts. Certain creatures can influence human minds, making them believe that terrible things are actually wonderful. Lord Harrison looked skeptical. Doctor, surely you don't believe in fairy tales and old legends? There must be a logical explanation for this. Before Dr. Williams could respond, a commotion arose in the courtyard below. Shouts and the sound of running feet echoed through the castle walls. Captain Marcus immediately went to the window and peered down at the scene unfolding in the morning light. Your Majesty, he said urgently, there's a man at the gates. He's asking to speak with you personally, and he says he has information about the missing villagers. The king stood quickly. Bring him to the throne room immediately. All of you come with me. The throne room was the most impressive chamber in the castle, with soaring ceilings, stained glass windows, and the golden throne that had been used by kings for 3 centuries. King Alexander took his seat while the counselors arranged themselves, on either side. Princess Elena positioned herself where she could see everything clearly. The guards brought in a tall man wearing simple traveling clothes. He appeared to be middle-aged, with dark hair and kind eyes. His face showed signs of hard travel, and his boots were muddy from walking long distances. He bowed respectfully before the throne. Your Majesty, he said in a clear, strong voice, my name is Thomas Wright. I'm a merchant who travels between villages selling tools and household goods. I've been searching for my wife and daughter for 3 weeks now. The king leaned forward with interest. They disappeared from one of the affected villages? From Millbrook, Your Majesty. My wife Hannah runs a bakery there, and our daughter Lucy is only 10 years old. When I returned from a trading trip to the eastern provinces, the entire village was empty. But I've been tracking the path everyone took into the forest, and I've discovered something important. Princess Elena felt her heart racing. Here was someone who might have answers, someone who had been investigating this mystery longer than anyone else. What did you discover? The king asked. Thomas Wright reached into his travel pack and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing what looked like a piece of black stone carved with strange symbols. I found this in the clearing where the creature takes people. It's part of a larger stone circle, but this piece had broken off. He held it up so everyone could see. The stone seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and the carved symbols appeared, to shift and change when viewed from different angles. Dr. Williams gasped in recognition. Those are binding runes, ancient symbols used to trap souls and prevent them from moving on to whatever comes after death. You're saying this creature is trapping souls? Lord Harrison asked in disbelief. Not just trapping them, Thomas Wright said grimly. Collecting them. I've been watching that clearing for days, hidden in the trees. Every night at midnight the Shadow Man appears with more people. They walk willingly into that pit and they never come back out. But I can hear their voices down there calling for help. The room fell silent as everyone processed this horrifying information. Princess Elena imagined hundreds of people trapped somewhere beneath the earth, conscious but unable to escape. There's more, Thomas continued. Last night I saw him studying a map. It showed this castle and all the surrounding lands. He was making marks on it, planning something. And I heard him talking to something else down in that pit. Something that answered back in a voice that didn't sound human. King Alexander gripped the arms of his throne tightly. What did they say? The Shadow Man told the creature in the pit that he had found the perfect place to complete their work. A place with hundreds of people all gathered together in one location. The voice from the pit was pleased and said that once they had enough souls, they could begin the real harvest. Captain Marcus stepped forward. What is the real harvest? Thomas Wright looked around at all the watching faces, then spoke the words that would change everything. They're not just taking people from this kingdom. The Shadow Man has been traveling between many lands, many kingdoms, collecting souls for years. Once they have enough, they plan to use all that trapped life energy to tear open a permanent doorway between our world and theirs. The pit isn't just a prison, it's a gateway. Princess Elena felt the blood drain from her face. A gateway to where? To a realm where creatures like the Shadow Man live in vast numbers. Once the doorway is opened wide enough, they won't need to sneak around taking people a few at a time. They'll be able to come through in armies and take everyone at once. The king stood from his throne, his face set with determination. How long do we have? Thomas Wright consulted a small journal he pulled from his pocket. Based on what I overheard, they need exactly 1,000 souls to complete the ritual. According to my count of the missing villages, they have about 800 now. Once they take everyone in this castle. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood what he meant. The Spring Festival had brought together nearly 200 people. Add the castle's regular inhabitants, guards, and servants, and the number would be very close to what the creatures needed. We have to evacuate immediately, Captain Marcus said urgently. Get everyone out of the castle and spread across the kingdom where they can't all be taken at once. But King Alexander shook his head slowly. If we run, they'll simply pursue us and take people from other villages until they reach their goal. We need to find a way to stop this permanently. Princess Elena stepped forward, her mind racing with possibilities. Thomas, when you were watching the clearing, did you see any weaknesses? Any way the Shadow Man might be vulnerable? Thomas Wright smiled grimly. Actually, Your Highness, I did notice one very important thing, but it's going to require incredible courage and perfect timing to take advantage of it. Thomas Wright moved to the large map on the wall and traced a path with his finger from the castle to the forest clearing. The Shadow Man's power comes from those black stones arranged in a circle, but during my nights of watching, I noticed that his connection to them weakens during daylight hours. He can still influence people during the day, but not as strongly. Princess Elena studied the map carefully. You're saying he's more vulnerable when the sun is up? Exactly, and there's something else. The stone circle has 13 stones, but one is different from the others. The center stone, the largest one, has cracks running through it. I believe that's the anchor stone, the one that controls all the others. If it could be destroyed, King Alexander nodded thoughtfully. The entire circle would lose its power. Potentially, yes, but destroying it won't be simple. The stone is harder than any material I've ever seen, and it's protected by the pit creature that lives below ground. During the day, that creature stays hidden, but it can sense when anyone gets too close to the stones. Captain Marcus began pacing as he considered the tactical challenges. We would need a distraction, something to keep both creatures occupied while someone attempts to destroy the anchor stone, and we would need weapons capable of breaking stone that hard. Dr. Williams had been quiet during most of the discussion, but now he spoke up with excitement. Wait. In the old texts I mentioned earlier, there are references to stones like these. They're not actually made of normal rock. They're crystallized soul energy, hardened over centuries. That means they might be vulnerable to certain types of disruption. What kind of disruption? The king asked. Pure iron forged while someone with a completely pure heart speaks words of love and hope. The texts say that soul stones cannot withstand contact with metal that has been blessed by genuine human emotion. Lord Harrison looked skeptical again. Doctor, that sounds like more fairy tale nonsense. Perhaps, Dr. Williams admitted, but given what we're facing, don't you think it's worth trying every possible solution, no matter how unlikely it seems? Princess Elena felt a sudden certainty growing in her chest. I'll do it. I'll be the one to destroy the anchor stone. The room erupted in protest from everyone except Thomas Wright, who studied the princess with calculating eyes. King Alexander stood immediately, his voice firm with parental concern. Absolutely not, Elena. I will not risk my daughter's life on such a dangerous mission. Father, think about it logically, Elena replied, surprising everyone with her calm tone. If this plan fails, we're all going to die anyway, or worse. At least this way we have a chance to save not just our kingdom, but all the other lands this creature plans to attack. Thomas Wright nodded approvingly. The princess is right, Your Majesty, and there's another reason she should be the one to attempt this. The Shadow Man has been studying the castle and its inhabitants. He's expecting soldiers, guards, people who think like warriors. He's not expecting a royal daughter who has never been in combat. Captain Marcus crossed his arms. That's exactly why it's too dangerous. Princess Elena has no experience with this kind of mission. Which is exactly why it might work, Elena insisted. Besides, I know these forests better than anyone. I've been riding through them since I was a child. I know every path, every hiding spot, every shortcut. The king walked to the window and stared out at the morning sun, wrestling with an impossible decision. As a father, every instinct told him to protect his daughter. As a king, he knew she might be their best hope for stopping a threat that could destroy everything they cared about. What would this plan actually involve? He asked finally. Thomas Wright spread a more detailed map on the table. The anchor stone sits in the exact center of the circle, about 50 yards from the edge of the clearing. During daylight hours, the Shadow Man retreats to a cave system about half a mile away. That gives us a window of opportunity. But you said the pit creature can sense intruders, Captain Marcus pointed out. Yes, but it reacts to hostile intentions and weapons. If someone approached the stones with genuine good intentions, carrying only the items needed to break the circle, it might not perceive them as a threat until it was too late. Dr. Williams was already making plans. I can have the castle's blacksmith forge an iron rod according to the specifications in the old texts. Princess Elena, you would need to hold the metal while it's being made and speak words of love and hope for all the people who have been taken. Princess Elena felt her heart beating faster, but not with fear, with determination. When would we do this? Tomorrow, Thomas Wright said firmly. I've been tracking the Shadow Man's patterns. Tomorrow night is when he plans to come to the castle. If we don't stop him before then, everyone here will join the others in that pit. The king turned back to face his daughter. In her blue eyes, he saw not the sheltered princess he had been protecting all her life, but a strong, brave woman ready to fight for her people. The realization was both proud and heartbreaking. The risk is enormous, Elena. If you're caught, I know, father. But if I don't try, we lose everything anyway. At least this way, we're fighting back. King Alexander looked around the room at his trusted advisors, seeking their counsel one final time. Captain Marcus looked worried, but resigned. Dr. Williams was already planning the specifics. Lord Harrison still appeared skeptical, but offered no alternative suggestions. Very well, the king said at last. We'll attempt this plan, but Elena, you won't go alone. Captain Marcus will position guards throughout the forest to provide backup if needed. No, Thomas Wright said quickly. The more people involved, the greater the chance the pit creature will sense hostile intentions. The princess needs to approach alone, carrying only the iron rod and her own courage. Princess Elena stepped forward and took her father's hands. I can do this, father. I know I can. And think of all the people we'll save, not just in our kingdom but in all the lands the Shadow Man plans to visit next. The king squeezed her hands tightly, remembering when she was small, and would come to him with scraped knees and brave smiles. She had always been fearless, even as a child. Now that courage might save them all. Then we begin preparations immediately, he declared. Dr. Williams, work with the blacksmith to create the weapon. Thomas, show us everything you know about the timing and layout of that clearing. Captain Marcus, I want our best riders ready to spread word across the kingdom in case this plan fails. As the council began to disperse to handle their various tasks, Sarah Miller appeared in the doorway. The young girl had recovered much of her strength and insisted on helping however she could. Your Highness, she said to Princess Elena, I want to come with you to the clearing. Elena knelt down to Sarah's eye level. That's very brave of you, Sarah, but it's too dangerous. Sarah's green eyes were determined. I know that clearing better than anyone else here. I know exactly where the Shadow Man hides during the day. Exactly how the pit creature moves underground. You need me. Thomas Wright considered this carefully. The girl might be right, Princess. And there's another factor to consider. Sarah survived an encounter with the Shadow Man once. She might have some natural resistance to his influence. Princess Elena looked into Sarah's young face and saw the same determination she felt in her own heart. This brave girl had already lost everything to the Shadow Man. She deserved a chance to fight back. All right, Sarah. You can come. But you stay hidden until the moment we need your help. Promise me. Sarah smiled for the first time since arriving at the castle. I promise, Your Highness. Tomorrow we're going to save everyone. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the castle buzzed with secret preparations. No one spoke openly about what was planned, but everyone seemed to sense that something momentous was about to happen. The spring festival decorations still hung in the ballroom, but now they seemed like decorations for a very different kind of celebration. Princess Elena spent the afternoon in her chambers, not preparing gowns or jewelry, but mentally rehearsing every detail of the dangerous mission ahead. Tomorrow she would either save her kingdom or die trying. Either way, she would face the Shadow Man with courage and determination. The real battle was about to begin. The castle's forge glowed red-hot in the pre-dawn darkness. Master Willem, the royal blacksmith, had worked through the night preparing the special iron rod according to Dr. Williams's ancient specifications. The metal had to be heated to precise temperatures while Princess Elena spoke continuously about her love for her people, her hope for their freedom, and her determination to protect the innocent. Elena's voice was hoarse from hours of speaking, but she continued without complaint. As the iron was shaped and cooled, she poured her heart into every word, thinking of Sarah's frightened face, of the empty villages, of all the families torn apart by the Shadow Man's evil magic. It's ready, Your Highness, Master Willem said finally, wiping sweat from his weathered face. The iron rod was 3 feet long, perfectly straight, and seemed to shimmer with an inner light that had nothing to do with the forge fire. Dr. Williams examined the finished weapon carefully. According to the texts, blessed iron should feel warm to the touch and grow brighter when near sources of dark magic. Can you feel anything unusual about it? Princess Elena wrapped her fingers around the rod. Immediately, warmth spread up her arms, and she felt a sense of strength and purpose that made her more confident about the dangerous task ahead. It feels alive somehow, like it wants to help. Thomas Wright entered the forge, dressed in dark traveling clothes and carrying a pack of supplies. The sun will rise in 1 hour. We need to reach the forest clearing while the Shadow Man is still in his cave and before the pit creature becomes fully active. Sarah Miller appeared beside him, wearing simple peasant clothes and sturdy boots. Despite her youth, her face showed the same determination that had helped her survive her first encounter with the creatures. She carried a small knife and a length of rope that might prove useful. King Alexander arrived with Captain Marcus and several other guards, all looking worried and uncertain about allowing the princess to undertake such a perilous mission. The king's face showed the strain of a sleepless night spent agonizing over his decision. Elena, he said, embracing his daughter tightly, promise me you'll be careful. If the situation becomes too dangerous, retreat immediately. No victory is worth losing you. Princess Elena hugged her father back, breathing in his familiar scent and drawing strength from his love. I promise to be as careful as possible, Father, but I also promise to do everything necessary to stop these creatures from hurting anyone else. The small group left the castle as the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon. They traveled on foot to avoid the noise of horses, moving swiftly through familiar paths that Princess Elena had explored countless times during happier days. Thomas Wright led the way, followed by Elena carrying the blessed iron rod, with Sarah bringing up the rear. The forest seemed different in the early morning light. Shadows moved strangely between the trees and sounds carried further than they should. Birds that should have been singing were silent, as if they sensed the unnatural presence that had taken root in their peaceful woods. How much further? Selena asked quietly as they climbed a steep ridge covered with oak trees. Just over this hill, Thomas replied. But from here on, we need to be completely silent. The pit creature has excellent hearing, and we don't know exactly how far its senses extend. They crested the ridge and looked down into a circular clearing that seemed to have been cut from the forest with supernatural precision. 13 black stones stood in a perfect circle, each one towering above the surrounding grass. In the center, the anchor stone rose even taller, its cracked surface reflecting the growing daylight in unsettling ways. But what made Princess Elena's heart race with horror was the pit itself. The ground in the very center of the circle had collapsed into a hole so deep that the bottom disappeared into absolute darkness. Even from this distance, she could hear faint voices echoing up from below, calling for help in languages she didn't recognize. "All those people," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "They're still alive down there." "Which means we can still save them," Elena replied firmly, though she felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of suffering represented by that terrible pit. Thomas Wright pointed to a cave entrance visible on the far side of the clearing. "The Shadow Man sleeps there during daylight hours. As long as the sun is up, he won't emerge. But the pit creature is active all the time. It just stays underground during the day." Princess Elena studied the layout carefully, planning her approach. The blessed iron rod felt warm and reassuring in her hands, but she knew that even with its power, she would have only one chance to destroy the anchor stone before the pit creature realized what was happening. "I'm going to circle around to the left," she decided. "That will put the sun at my back, which might provide some additional protection according to the old texts. Sarah, you wait here until you see me reach the center stone. If something goes wrong, run back to the castle immediately and warn my father." Sarah nodded, though her green eyes showed she had no intention of abandoning the princess if trouble arose. Thomas Wright checked his pocket watch and frowned with concern. "You have perhaps 30 minutes before the sun gets high enough to wake the pit creature fully. After that, it will sense any disturbance near the stones immediately." Princess Elena took a deep breath, said a quick prayer for courage, and began making her way down the hill toward the clearing. Each step felt momentous, as if she were walking toward her destiny. The blessed iron rod grew warmer as she approached the stone circle, confirming that Dr. Williams's research had been accurate. The grass in the clearing was brown and withered, as if the presence of the stones had drained all life from the earth. As Elena stepped between two of the outer stones, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. The voices from the pit became clearer, and she could hear individual pleas for help in languages from across the known world. The anchor stone loomed above her, easily 12 feet tall and covered with the same strange symbols that Thomas Wright had shown them on the broken fragment. Up close, Elena could see that the cracks running through the stone pulsed with a faint red light, as if something inside were trying to break free. She raised the blessed iron rod above her head, preparing to strike the stone with all her strength. But before she could bring it down, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. Something massive was moving in the tunnels below, drawn by her presence near the anchor stone. "Princess, look out!" Sarah's voice called from the hillside. Elena spun around just as enormous tentacles burst from the pit, reaching toward her with incredible speed. The pit creature was even more horrifying than she had imagined, with writhing appendages covered in what looked like human faces, all twisted in expressions of agony and despair. She dove to the side, rolling across the dead grass as tentacles crashed into the ground where she had been standing. The blessed iron rod remained clutched in her hands, its warmth now burning almost too hot to hold as it reacted to the creature's evil presence. More tentacles emerged from the pit, and Elena realized that the creature was far larger than anyone had suspected. It wasn't just hiding in the tunnels below, it was the tunnels, a massive entity that had grown throughout the cave system by feeding on trapped souls. From the cave entrance across the clearing came an inhuman roar of rage. The Shadow Man had been awakened by the commotion and was emerging into the daylight despite the pain it clearly caused him. His form seemed less solid in the bright morning sun, but his fury made him even more dangerous. "You dare interfere with the great harvest?" he screamed, his voice echoing unnaturally across the forest. "Those souls belong to my master now." Princess Elena dodged another tentacle and sprinted toward the anchor stone, knowing she had only seconds before both creatures overwhelmed her. The iron rod blazed with light now, so bright she could barely look at it directly. She reached the base of the anchor stone and swung the rod with all her strength, striking the largest crack running down its center. The impact sent shockwaves through the entire clearing. The stone rang like a massive bell, and the red light in its cracks flared brilliantly. But the stone held. Though damaged, it remained standing. The Shadow Man was crossing the clearing now, moving with unnatural speed despite the sunlight weakening his form. The pit creature's tentacles reached for Elena from multiple directions, giving her nowhere to run. "Sarah, stay back!" Elena shouted, seeing the brave girl starting down the hill to help. But Sarah had her own plan. She pulled out her small knife and cut her palm, letting drops of blood fall onto the ground. "By the blood of the innocent," she cried out in words that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her own knowledge. "By the tears of the pure, I call upon the ancient protections." The effect was immediate and startling. Golden light erupted from where Sarah's blood had touched the earth, spreading across the clearing in brilliant waves. The pit creature shrieked in pain and pulled its tentacles back into the darkness. The Shadow Man stopped his advance, covering his face and howling as the light burned him. Princess Elena understood immediately. The old protections that Dr. Williams had read about weren't just fairy tales. They were real magic, powered by genuine sacrifice and pure intentions. Sarah's innocent blood had awakened defenses that had been sleeping. The reunion in the castle courtyard was unlike anything the kingdom had ever witnessed. Families that had been separated for weeks embraced with tears of joy and disbelief. Parents found children they thought were lost forever. Husbands and wives held each other as if they would never let go again. The sound of laughter and crying filled the air as over 800 people celebrated their impossible return from the Shadow Realm. Princess Elena stood on the castle steps, watching the emotional reunions with a heart full of gratitude and wonder. Sarah Miller had found her parents among the rescued villagers and was currently wrapped in their arms, all three of them crying happy tears. The girl who had shown such incredible courage in the face of ancient evil was, in this moment, simply a daughter glad to be home. King Alexander approached his daughter, his face glowing with pride and relief. "You did something extraordinary today, Elena. You saved not just our kingdom, but potentially countless other lands that would have been targeted next." Elena smiled, but her attention kept drifting to Thomas Wright, who stood apart from the celebrations near the castle's ancient oak tree. Even surrounded by the joy of reunion, he seemed somehow separate, as if he existed in a different world from everyone else. "Father," Elena said quietly, "Thomas isn't who we thought he was, is he?" The king followed her gaze and nodded thoughtfully. "No, I don't believe he is. But without him, none of this would have been possible. We owe him a debt that can never be fully repaid." Elena excused herself and walked over to where Thomas stood, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Up close, she could see that his appearance was subtly changing. The simple merchant's clothes were becoming more translucent, and there was a quality of light around him that hadn't been there before. "You're leaving, aren't you?" she asked. Thomas turned to her with a gentle smile that confirmed her suspicions. "My work here is finished. The pathways between your world and the Shadow Realm have been sealed. Your people are safe, and word will spread to other kingdoms about how to recognize and defend against similar threats. But you're not really a merchant named Thomas Wright." He laughed softly, and the sound was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I am Thomas Wright in a way. I took that identity when I began investigating the Shadow Man's activities. But you're right that it's not my true nature." Princess Elena felt a mixture of curiosity and sadness. "Will you tell me who you really are?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "I am one of the Guardians, as I told the Shadow Man. We exist between worlds, watching for threats that could spread from one realm to another. When the Dark Council began harvesting souls on a massive scale, we knew intervention would eventually be necessary." "The Dark Council?" "A group of ancient entities that feed on life energy and suffering. They've been exiled from most populated worlds, but they occasionally find ways to break through barriers like the one the Shadow Man created. Our job is to stop them before they can establish permanent footholds in peaceful realms like yours." Elena absorbed this information, trying to imagine a universe where such cosmic battles were constantly being fought by beings she had never known existed. "Are there many Guardians?" Enough to do the work that needs doing, Thomas replied diplomatically, but not so many that we can be everywhere at once. Sometimes we have to rely on the courage and wisdom of people like you and Sarah to tip the balance toward the light. What will happen to the Dark Council now that their harvest failed? Thomas's expression grew more serious. They'll retreat and look for easier targets. But your victory today will be remembered and shared among the worlds they might threaten. Knowledge is often the best defense against darkness, and now many more people will know what signs to watch for. The sun had nearly set, and Thomas was becoming more translucent by the minute. Princess Elena realized this might be her last chance to ask the questions that had been burning in her mind since the battle at the Stone Circle. Thomas, why did you let us face so much danger? If you had the power to destroy the Shadow Man all along, why didn't you act sooner? His eyes grew sad, but understanding. Because power given freely is always stronger than power taken by force. You and Sarah chose to sacrifice yourselves for others. That choice created a resonance of pure intention that made it possible for me to act against the Shadow Man. Without your courage and Sarah's innocent sacrifice, my abilities would have been greatly limited. Elena nodded, beginning to understand the deeper principles that governed conflicts between good and evil. So our choices mattered. They really made a difference. Your choices were the difference, Thomas corrected gently. Sarah's willingness to bleed for strangers, your determination to risk everything for your people, even the blacksmith's care, in forging the blessed iron rod. All of these acts of love and courage combined to create something more powerful than any guardian's magic. A warm evening breeze stirred the oak tree's leaves, and Thomas began to fade more rapidly. I have to go now, Princess. Other worlds need watching, and the Dark Council will not remain quiet for long. Wait, Elena said urgently. Will we ever see you again? Thomas smiled as his form became almost invisible. If your world ever faces a threat it cannot handle alone, the Guardians will know. But I believe your people have learned something important today. You've discovered that ordinary courage, when combined with genuine love for others, can overcome the darkest evil. His voice was barely a whisper now. Remember that lesson, and teach it to others. The universe needs more people who understand that true power comes from the willingness to sacrifice for something greater than themselves. And then he was gone, leaving only the scent of starlight and the memory of his gentle smile. Princess Elena stood alone under the oak tree for several minutes, processing everything that had happened. When she finally turned to rejoin the celebration, she found Sarah Miller waiting for her with a knowing expression. He was never really human, was he? Sarah asked. No, Elena replied. But he was definitely real, and he was definitely on our side. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. My mother always told stories about guardian angels who watched over good people. I never believed them before today. Together, they walked back toward the castle, where the reunited families continued their celebrations under a sky full of bright stars. Dr. Williams had organized the castle's kitchens to provide food for everyone, and Captain Marcus was arranging temporary housing for those whose homes in distant villages would take days to reach. King Alexander found his daughter, and Sarah near the main hall, where people were sharing stories of their experiences in the Shadow Realm and expressing their gratitude for their rescue. Elena, the king said, the council has been discussing how to honor what you and Sarah accomplished today. We want to ensure that your courage is remembered and that the lessons learned are preserved for future generations. Princess Elena considered this carefully. I think the best honor would be to establish a school where people can learn to recognize supernatural threats and develop the courage to face them, not just in our kingdom, but open to students from all lands. The Academy of Guardians, Sarah suggested with excitement. We could teach people that they don't have to wait for magical beings to save them. They can learn to save themselves and others. The king smiled at both girls' wisdom. I think that's exactly what Thomas Wright would have wanted us to do. Consider it approved. As the night deepened and the celebrations continued, Princess Elena felt a profound sense of completion. The Shadow Man was destroyed, the Dark Council's plans were ruined, and hundreds of innocent people had been reunited with their families. But more importantly, She had discovered something about herself and her world that would guide her actions for the rest of her life. She had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite being afraid. She had learned that love for others could give someone strength they never knew they possessed. And she had learned that sometimes the most ordinary people could accomplish the most extraordinary things. The stars shone brightly over the kingdom that night, as if the universe itself was celebrating the victory of light over darkness. And in the castle below, a princess and a miller's daughter began planning a school that would teach others to be guardians of their own world, ready to face whatever darkness might threaten the innocent in the future. The great harvest was over, but the real work of protecting the light had just begun, and Princess Elena knew with absolute certainty that she and her people were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.